name is Sarah, and I'm one of the booksellers here. I'm so pleased that you're joining us to celebrate C.M. Alongi's book, Alongi, The Witch Who Trades with Death. A few housekeeping things before we get on with the show. Tonight you'll hear from C.M., then there will be a time at the end of the program for audience questions. After Q&A, please allow C.M. to move to the signing counter, which is the glass display case you passed on the way from the store, inside the store. You may line up there to say hello and get a signed copy of the book. If you buy a book here this evening, you are not only supporting our author, but also a locally owned independent bookstore, and we cannot thank you enough. Finally, please allow me to introduce our guests. C.M. Alongi is a sci-fi fantasy author and content creator, best known for her TikTok series, Cafe Latte. Her debut novel, Citadel, was nominated for the Minnesota Book Award, and this year she was nominated for the Cheer Choice Award. The Witch Who Trades with Death is her second full-length novel. When she's not creating, she's either crocheting, adding swords to her growing collection, or defending her furniture from her roommate's evil cats. Please join me in welcoming C.M. Alongi.
And thank you all for coming. Like she said, reading, Q&A. We're going to keep it chill, we're going to keep it casual, and then any selfies or pics can happen during the signing.
I'm just going to take this just in case. Not like you like on me, or kind of.
Do you need it for the recording?
Yeah.
I know the world. I know how that works.
Just don't bump your head, please. Yes, perfect.
Is this good?
We're good?
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to get on to this. We're going to start, this is chapter 19, so this is right after Kana, the main character, and her best friend Haz have signed up for the military, and it's like day one. Hamili, that's Haz's dad, went to wake both Kana and Haz before dawn, but she was already awake, plagued by nightmares about undead creatures and Yamueto's hands, the evil emperor. This was a mistake, she thought, picking at the breakfast Hamili made for them. She didn't understand how Haz could wolf his down. It tasted like ash. What happens if someone deserts? She asked, quietly enough that only Haz heard. Well, it depends. Sometimes it's tundra banishment for a week or a fortnight, but sometimes they just execute you, he said. Abandoning your comrades puts everyone at risk. She gulped, stomach churning around what little she'd managed to eat. Amadi trudged into the dining room. This is Haz's grandmother, older woman, carrying a shield, spear, and heavy-looking bundle in a blanket. It was very odd seeing such a frail woman carrying weapons of war, but she held them with confidence. I think the spear and shield are big enough for Haz, she grunted, dropping the blanket and bundle, but the armor is definitely not. She handed Haz the spear. It eclipsed him in height by at least an arm's length. He whistled, testing the edge. Did you sharpen this last night? No, I'm sending you to war with dull weapons, she said, rolling her eyes. She unwrapped the bundle, passing him a hand axe and sheathed knife. You get the shield and weapons. It's best if they stay in the family. Kana, take this and try it on. She pressed a folded piece of clothing in Kana's hands. She swallowed, her throat dry, and went up to her room. When Kana heard the word armor, she thought of the Regualian suits of metal and leather carefully folded on top of each other, or the ancient bone armor preserved in one of Princess Sita's library books. She did not think of cloth, but that's what Gurren armor was, at least for foot soldiers. Multiple layers of linen, pelt, and wool had been sewn to form a tough hide, which Kana had no doubt would keep her warm, though she worried about its ability to protect her from spears and claws. The armor wrapped around her arms, chest, and stopped at her shins. It was supposed to go only to the knees. It came with underclothes, too, a long shirt and trousers. The belt pinched in at her waist and would probably be used to hold weapons. Bulky leather gloves went on last. Everything fit well enough, but still felt wrong, like she was a cheap actor about to put on a laughable performance. She went back downstairs to find Haz hiding behind his new shield as Amadi threw seat cushions at him. Your Baba spent far too long cleaning the dishes this morning. All the debris was hard and crusty. Sorry, he laughed. I surrender. Baba, I swear, I just forgot. I'm aware, Hamili grumbled, but he couldn't quite hide his amusement. He looked up, spotting Kana first. Well, God's damn, you look like a soldier. I look like a child playing dress-up, Kana thought, but didn't say. Amadi pinched the armor, testing how it fit. With a satisfied nod, she handed Kana her one last piece, her helmet. The metal was dulled with age, but she trusted it to protect her a lot more than cloth. The The inside was covered in leather, but not that made it particularly comfortable when she put it on. Haas wrapped his knuckles on the helmet. Great, now we just need to get me some armor, so I don't die. You're not gonna die, Kana grumbled, adjusting the helmet from where it tilted at Haas's touch. That's half the reason I'm doing this. The line to town hall was almost as long as last time. Despite the cold, pre-dawn air, Kana was completely warm, almost cozy in her armor and cloak. She took the helmet off, tucking it under her arm. It made her feel a little less ridiculous. Almost everyone around her had a similar conundrum as she and Haas. She saw several spears, but their owners were missing helmets or armor or shields. Some shields needed a spear. Some people were in full armor but still needed directions. Move, someone ordered, roughly pushing her aside. Kana stumbled to her knees and dropped her helmet. Hey, Haas barked. His eyes widened. Saipo? That you? Kana pushed herself to her feet with her helmet, brushing the snow from her legs. The burly, bearded guard from the Pinsviri household was indeed there, crossing his arms as he waited impatiently for the line to move forward. Why, good morning, my dear friend Hazyaman, Haas said, lowering his voice to sound like Saipa. Would you mind terribly if I join you in line? I'm in a great hurry, and it would mean so much if I'd shut your mouth, Saipa ordered. I don't have time for you militia brats. You're militia too, aren't you? No, I'm a Pinsviri guard, employed directly by an old family. They loan us out to the chief and unit so we can fight with the other full-time soldiers, separate from you goat farmers. But the town still makes us get supplies with the rest of the rabble. Gods, it's almost like we're all soldiers in this mess together, Haas taunted. Saipa pushed him back with a single hand. First rule of the military. Just because you carry a spear doesn't make you a soldier. You're still a nobody. He gave Kana a side-eyed glare. Or a filthy soul-sucker. She shrank back, wishing her armor would swallow her. Haas whistled. Bayana always said you were a jackass before your morning tea. I see she underplayed it. Saipa rounded on him. What did you call me? Haas did not back down. I merely repeated what your master's granddaughter told me. The guard smirked, brown beard twisting with the movement. Tell me, when you showed such disrespect, did she slap you, punch you, or go for your non-existent balls? They were in a domestic abusive relationship. It was a whole thing. The two glared at each other. Kana and everyone else stayed back, wondering who would throw the first punch. The line's moving, someone shouted behind them. Get out of the way if you're gonna fight. Haas, let's go, Kana whispered, pulling him into town hall. Can you try to avoid getting hurt until we're in an actual battle, she hissed, once Saipa was safely behind them. When he stops being a jackass. I'm serious, Haas. So am I, he said. Beneath the main hall was the armory. Tired-looking soldiers, those full-timers Saipa mentioned, perhaps, helped fetch weapons and told people where to go. Where did they get all of this? Kana asked, gaping at the rows of spears and shields. Most were made of bone, but at least a quarter of them were wood. She hadn't seen this much wood in Pahuda ever, not even in the Pinsviri house. Well, if a soldier outgrows their armor or dies without heirs, it ends up here, Haas said. But most of it is made by workers. Not everyone can make a good suit of armor or a spear that won't break the first time you use it. The ones who are good at it are hired by the chief. She even buys wood from the rest of the kingdom, and Tlafar once upon a time, because it's easier than metal. How much will it cost us? Nothing. They're technically free, paid for with those good old taxes. How do you know all of this? Bayana told me. He grimaced. Gods, every time I say her name, I feel I need to wash my mouth and ears out with soap. The soldiers found some armor for Haas and weapons for Kana. The shield was multiple layers of animal pelts and hard leather, surprisingly heavy, and big enough to cover most of her body. They gave her the shortest spear they could find, which is still 2 heads taller than her, as well as a knife and axe that both went on her belt. All of it felt too heavy, bulky, and unreal. Try to look a little less terrified, girl, the soldier grumbled, helping her slip the axe into her belt. We'll have more luck with that if you can tell us where to go, Haas cheered. He actually managed to look confident and almost dashing in his armor, as if he were wearing any other outfit. When they handed over their enlistment forms, the soldier checked them against a slate slab covered in numbers and glyphs Kana couldn't read. He said, well, you're both in the same squad. The Red Frog's 9. He made a face at that. What's a frog? It's like a lizard from the Rogwalian jungles, Kana explained. It hops. That strikes fear in the heart, Haas snorted. Why are they giving us names like that? Well, the color's the battalion, the animal is the company, and the number is the unit, the veteran explained. Most companies only have 7 units, but we've got so many recruits that some have as many as 11. Most Rogwalians are in red and orange battalions, so that's where all the weird names are. You'll find your unit on the field. They'll have a banner. Now get going. And we'll end it at that. So yeah, this is The Witcher trades with death. Kana was a concubine to the evil emperor. She managed to run away. She made it as far as the town of Bahuda, and now that town and country is under attack by that same evil emperor, so it's literally fight or die. And they have problems. They run into, because there's, a little bit of xenophobia, a little bit of racism, a little bit of classism. A lot of people don't like magic or are suspicious of it, and she's traumatized and has to deal with recovering from the trauma of being a concubine / sex slave for 6 years. So, a real lighthearted read, just totally sweet. Man, questions, comments, concerns, hopes, dreams? We could just stare at each other for a little while.
Is there going to be a sequel to that?
No, this is a standalone. I've already started like 3 sequels, and I need to finish them before I start any more sequels. So anything that isn't a Cafe Latte novel, a Citadel novel, or a Blackwing novella is a standalone for the foreseeable future. Yes.
Aren't you planning on releasing all 3 books in the foreseeable next year?
No.
Or 3 books this year?
Oh no, that
I mean,
I'm not that good. So this year was The Witcher Trades with Death, and then in October it's Heart of Iron. So that's 2. Authors, you don't want to publish more than 2 books a year.
I just saw a TikTok comment about
Rebecca Yarns published her first 3 books almost back to back.
We have published a Cafe Latte journal. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, my mom did all of that, and second of all, it's a journal.
I want to buy the cookbook.
Yes,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah,
I'm trying to track down where I can get one.
Amazon is currently the only place where that has that. But yeah, no, the cookbook, again, mostly written by my mom, but I did take pictures of the food, and I ate the food, which is equally important.
Very
Yeah, no, authors, typically it's only 1 or 2 books a year. For me, I've got everything stacked up through 2030, basically. And yeah, unfortunately I'm not going to be able to get to the Kingdom of Starlight series, the Accidentally Kidnapped, I don't know if you saw that. That's going to be 4 or 5 books, I just know. So I've outlined them, I've got world building for it, I'm just I cannot get to this yet because I have so much other crap going on. But it is what it is.
Can you tell us about your writing process?
Oh God. So in the writing world, there's a spectrum of all writers, and we fall somewhere on this. There's planners, and then there's pantsers. Pantsers fly by the seat of their pants. They don't prep anything, they don't prepare anything, no world building, almost no research beforehand. It's all made up as they go along. It's witchcraft. They're insane. On the other end of the spectrum are the planners. These are the guys who outline everything. They do a lot of the world building, character profiles, everything they can before even start writing chapter 1. I am much closer to a planner than a pantser. So I'll have the world figured out, the major characters figured out, and the entire plot outlined before I hit chapter 1. Some things might change as I'm writing. Quite a few things will change in the revision process, but I need that parachute. If I don't have it, I can't write. I've tried. It doesn't work.
Is this going to be a duology or a series?
A series, definitely.
Yay!
At least a trilogy. I'm hoping I can talk them into a lot more than a trilogy, but don't quote me on that. Fuck the recording me. Oops. Yes, sir.
How do you decide what type of books and what books you're gonna work on first compared to what you think can come after that? And how do the books affect that you're writing right now? How do those affect what you're gonna write in the future?
Gotcha. So how to choose what books to write when you have so many ideas for books. That is a good one. So when I was still working a day job in food service and didn't make any money from this at all, I basically just wrote what I wanted to write. And what I wanted to write at the time was Citadel. That is one that I've been working on since I was 12. But I finally managed to figure it out. And that was the first book that I had, totally written, revised within an inch of its life. It looked really, it was really good. I had some sensitivity readers look at it because I'm not autistic, but the main character is. just all that stuff. So that was the one that I pitched to literary agents and then editors. And then once I had that, I decided, you know what, I had this idea for a novella series. Novellas are much shorter, and so they're a lot easier to produce. So I'm thinking, well, I'll just self-publish a bunch of novellas in this series leading up to Citadel, so that way I'll already have a nice little readership for me. And all of that was happening when I started Cafe Latte. That was a busy year. And so that's when Blackwing got started. That is a novella series, epic fantasy adventure, classic save the world, but instead of medieval Europe, it's the world is based off of ancient Greece and Rome. So that's pretty fun. So those two were kind of locked in, and then with Cafe Latte, it's super popular right now. So at that point, it's just like, oh, that's. I don't want to say it's a purely business decision, but like definitely as you grow your audience and your whole monetary income is based on what you're producing and creating, the audience definitely has a say. So for now, what it is you know, the finishing up the series that I've started is top priority. When it comes to standalones, it's honestly kind of whichever one I feel like at the moment. The Witcher Trades with Death, I wrote that because I was bored. It was between Citadel and Blackwing edits, so it's like might as well. The one I'm working on now is basically Bridgerton with magic and murder. So that's something like, okay, I'm interested in writing it, but also Bridgerton is huge, so I can just kind of cling to their coattails a little tiny bit. And that is also something that especially editors and agents talk about. You can have the best book ever, but if they don't think it will sell because it's a mermaid book and mermaids just aren't selling right now, you're gonna have a really hard time finding a publisher. But if it's, like after the Hunger Games, that was a great time to be a dystopian YA author because dystopian YA books were flying off the shelves. So it is definitely it's the old balancing act of business and money and all that stuff versus what you actually want to write. And the trick is finding the ones with the most overlap. There is a publishing company that my literary agent has put me in touch with. They basically really want a standalone upper young adult book that I can write. And I'm just like, here's 7 pitches. I can do any of them. It's going to be low effort. Pick and choose. And they've chosen 2. So now I got to get to decide between a Sleeping Beauty retelling or an Eros and Psyche retelling. And I'm leaning toward the Greek myth one. Because that seems more fun. Yeah, no. I mean, I know I could definitely do either, but so Greek mythology is hot, but also who does Eros and Psyche? No. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of how it's very much a moment by moment. How do you feel about it? Sometimes it's just kind of a waiting game a little bit, or even I've written this book, it's not going to sell now, so I'm going to put it on the shelf and wait a few years, and then when the editors and agents feel like they can actually sell it because the time is right and the trends are lining up, then I can start pitching again. And K. Jemison had to do that a couple of times. So
How many hours do you write? Like a day or a week, or what's that like?
so I have to balance it with my content creation. So let's see here. Today and yesterday was a lot of filming, and filming takes a lot out of you. Over Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays tend to be devoted mostly to script writing, but once that's done, I do flip over to book writing. And then Wednesdays, Thursdays are for book writings. And I tend to go by chapters, and most of my chapters tend to be about 1,000 words. For reference, that book is 110,000 words, 400 pages. This is also about 400 pages, but there's more text crammed into it, so it's 125,000 words. So I tend to write 1 to 2 chapters a day, ideally, about 5-ish days a week, so anywhere from 5 to 10 chapters a week. Yes.
When you're pitching your books, how many of them are complete manuscripts versus how many are just the synopsis that you're sending to editors?
So this is where being an already established author is very privileged. These days, pitches are just pitches. They're not, the manuscript is not done at all. Because it's like selling anything. The publisher has to know that you can deliver a product. If a publisher, God, I can't even think of a time that when a publisher would give a first-time debut author an advance or a contract of any kind if they didn't already have a workable product in hand. Maybe if it was a nonfiction thing like a history or whatever, and you got to use the grant money for that, but that is a risk. So when you're a debut author, you're a first-time author, you have to have a manuscript in hand. That manuscript has to be polished to within an inch of its life. Second or third book also definitely helps to have the manuscript in hand. These days, because I already have 2 full-length novels published on shelves, the third one is coming out this October. It just needs cover art at this point. And I have the Blackwing novella series. Like, I have proven to be like, I can write a book, which is more than 95% of all people on this planet can claim to do. So now, because I am an established professional, now I can be at the point where it's just like, okay, I have an idea, give me money and I'll start on it. But I will say, writing under contract, under deadline, is a different experience from writing without a contract. I've experienced this with Citadel's sequel, Demon's Nest. Granted, this is my first ever sequel that I've done, so that's also messing around with my head a little bit. But yeah, having an external deadline for that you don't control at all, that was tense. that I'm not entirely sure I like it all that much, to be honest. I think I kind of prefer writing what I like, and then after I have it, being like, okay, who wants it? But yeah, no, it is what it is. Publishing industry is an industry, and they, like any business, they want high rewards for the lowest risk possible.
I'm also trying to track down where I can get the Blackwing novella series.
That is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're still working on, the guy I wanted to do my audio is also the editor, and we have something of a gentleman's agreement. It's not locked and loaded, but I hate to, break a promise. He wants to do the audio for those books to build up his profile, because he wants to do that professionally, but he's been having a lot of health issues recently, which is why the Blackwing novella series does not have an audiobook yet. I'm working on volume 2 now, and it's one of those things where once I'm done with that, I gotta be like, Mike, buddy, every day we don't do this is a day I'm losing a sale, so either figure it out or I gotta sell the audio rights to someone else. So, it is what it is. This is why you don't work with friends. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
You mentioned that you wrote The Witch Who Trades with Death when you were bored between 2 different novels.
Yep.
What specifically inspired the story itself, though?
Who fucking knows? Honestly, that is on cue. Where do you get your ideas from? A lot of times I can track where I get my ideas from, like with Citadel, with Blackwing, with Cafe Latte. But with Witch Who Trades with Death, that one just kind of came out from the abyss. It just smacked me from the nether. I don't know what it was, because I've spent a year, it was right before COVID, I did spend a year volunteering at a rape crisis center, so I knew I wanted to write a book concerning that, even though I myself am not a DV or SA survivor, knock on wood. Yeah, no, sometimes I just get the idea for a fantasy world, and then I'm just like, okay, I tend to start big and then go small. Like, this world, this magic system, this society exists. Okay, what about the individual people that make it up? What problems are they facing? Yeah, no, that one just kind of, yeah, it just kind of morphed itself, and And it's one of those things where it's like, I think some of the best things happen with when authors are bored. When you put pressure on us to, you have to write, with this specific genre, with this specific prompt, under this deadline, we can come up with something, but it's not gonna be that good. But if you just leave us alone, or even worse, say you don't get to write. Now that's where all the ideas come. Like so many of my best ideas for TikTok skits, for books, specific scenes, chapters, characters, happened when I was like in the middle of a food service shift and could not physically write. So I had to like grab a notepad or the slips of paper we used to take orders and jot it down and stick it in my pocket so that way I wouldn't forget it.
That happens to me a lot when I'm working on, like when I'm out of the house.
Yep.
I have no idea, just hits me and I'm like, okay, how do I do this?
You always keep your phone on you with a notes app, or always keep a notebook, pen, or paper with you. This is why authors almost always have notebooks, pens, papers with them at all times, because we know if we don't write down the idea, it's gone forever. Doesn't matter how good it is, how original it is, how excited we are about it, it will disappear. But it is what it is. Anything else?
Your own project you really want to do that you haven't started yet?
Kingdom of Starlight. Definitely. That is, so before Cafe Latte, at the start of 2023, at my Cafe Latte started with a Tumblr prompt. I did this mini TikTok series called Accidentally Kidnapped. And it came from a Tumblr prompt that was basically, said something along the lines of, despite having a reputation for a Dark Lord, you do have a moral code. So when the princess of the enemy kingdom shows up on your doorstep showing obvious signs of abuse, you take her in, and then the kingdom shows up demanding that you return the princess that you kidnapped from them. What do? And it was like 6 or 7 episodes total. Just a fun little thing that I explored and did. It was very comedic. And then so many people were like, where's the book? I want this book. I need book recs for this. And I, the professional author, was like, might as well do it. So it was actually a way to get people from TikTok to my Patreon to support me financially that way. It seriously accelerated the rate at which I was able to quit my day job and do this full time. So I wrote a rough draft, and I mean rough draft. And I warned them every single time I uploaded a chapter, like, guys, this is like, put your expectations to below fan fiction. Because even when I post fan fiction, I at least self-edit it a little bit more. But they all really liked it, and it was really fun, and I realized as I was writing it that it's actually 3 books in a trench coat, at least. I've revisited it, I've got the whole world figured out, I've got like the 4 to 5 books it's going to be outlined, the characters. It's basically Game of Thrones on a planet that does not rotate. So you got one side of the planet locked forever. It's tidally locked. It is one side of the planet is always facing the sun, the other side totally facing away from the sun. So you've got this very thin habitable zone in the middle. I'm really excited for it. A lot of queer rep. The main character is going to be a lesbian. Her best friend is the bodyguard who's gay. Like there's enemies to lovers going on. Like, and I can't write it yet because it's a series. And I already have 3 of them.
I'm so mad that you can't write it yet.
I know, right?
I'm so excited.
However, it might actually be a good thing because even though we're going to have to wait until at least the 2030s, if not straight up 2040, the way I want to write it requires a little more skill than I currently have. So, good news, I get to practice more. And every page you write makes you a better writer. So, I'll be able to revisit that when I can actually tackle it the way that I would want to.
When you said flying by the seat of your pants as a writer is witchcraft, I'm writing a book, sort of, just writing stuff down. I'm do no planning. Don't plan at all.
Burn her! I mean, oh my
You want me
god.
to non-code the book?
Huh? I don't know. my mother is also an author. She's actually a New York Times bestseller of paranormal romance. And I found out only a few years ago she's a pantser. She hates outlining, like getting her agent has literally said getting her to give a synopsis or an outline. Very standard stuff, by the way, that you give to the agent and publisher when they give you the contract. It's like pulling teeth. And she especially hates it because she always ends up, she never adheres to the outline or synopsis. She just does, and I'm just like, Mother, how? And she's just like, and then she'll complain about writing herself into a corner. And I'm like, yeah, of course you did, because you didn't plan it out. You didn't think things through. If you had outlined, you would have been able to see this happening, and you wouldn't have to write your way out of it.
I just write. I listen to music, I write, and then if I write myself into corner, I'll go back into the thing and write a different scene, and then write a different scene.
I mean, yeah, that works. And revisions are what that is totally for, and rewrites. People say, finishing the rough draft is very, very difficult. It's also the easiest part of the process. It's the self-editing and the revising and the realizing that none of this makes sense, so you gotta throw it all away and start all over. That's the hard part. But it's also what separates the amateurs from the professionals. So that and putting up with all the rejections from literary agents and editors. Because like I said, you can have the best book in the world, it will get rejected so many times. Citadel was rejected at least 30 times. I got off light. I got off easy with that. I know authors whose manuscripts have been very good, well-written manuscripts, by the way, have been rejected over 100 times, if not 200. My mother used to say that before she became a bestseller, she could have completely redecorated the apartment wallpaper with rejection letters. And this was in the 90s and early aughts, so back when they were it was physical paper rather than emails. Sometimes they wouldn't even give her print out the whole paper. They would it would be like a sliver of paper. She wasn't even worth a whole page. Just yeah, no, XOXO, literary agent. Yeah. It's rough. And then ironically, you still get rejected, but like I said, once you get established, it's a lot easier to get the contracts, the publishers, because you already have an audience. But you can't get an audience unless you publish something, but you can't publish something unless you have an audience, and it's hell of a loop. Sometimes you can break that with self-publishing. Self-publishing is a godsend in many ways, and but it also has its own problems and difficulties.
What's the process of self-publishing?
So the process of self-publishing, the big difference is that with trad publishing, traditional publishing, the publisher does everything, other than writing. They're the ones who have the editors, the proofreaders, the cover artists, the distribution, they contact the booksellers, that's all on them. You have to do everything for self-publishing, which means you have to hire an editor. This step is non-negotiable, and so many people skip it, which is why self-publishing has such a bad rep of horrible, low-quality books. You have to hire at least one editor, preferably two. The developmental or content editor, this is the one who reads your book as a whole, and instead of proofreading or line editing, they don't worry about any of that. They're like, this scene makes no sense, cut it. Or these two characters are basically the same person, you should combine them. Or you need to completely rewrite the ending. The big stuff like that. Then there's line editors who are like, this sentence is way too long, you need to chop it up. You use the word mostly 5 times on this page. In chapter 5, this character is a blonde, but in chapter 17, they're a brunette. Stuff like that. And then there's the proofreader. And you go in that order for obvious reasons. So it's edited, it's polished. At some point you have beta readers and sensitivity readers in there as needed as well. Then you have to hire a cover artist. This is where we're at with Heart of Iron, by the way. I've hired the cover artist, really excited about it, by the way. He was literally my first choice. You can do it cheap. The Blackwing series, I used getcovers.com. It's like $30 a pop. They just use Photoshop and stuff like that, so you can definitely tell they look like cheap covers, but they're still good. So that works. I wasn't doing that for Heart of Iron. That guy, over the next few months, I'm gonna end up giving him at least $2,000 for his a lot of self-published authors skip this step and instead do the cover art themselves. I've only done that for the cookbook and the recipe journal, and those are two things that like we care about them, but we also really kind of don't. Unless you have a degree in like graphic design or something like that, hire a cover artist. Marketing it is basically the same. I mean, they say that traditional publishers will market your book. No, they won't. They won't. You have to market your book. They don't care. And then there's like, putting it for sale. You have to upload it yourself into Amazon KDP, Barnes & Noble, just all of that stuff. You can use other stuff. Like I tried to use Ingram Spark. Ingram Spark's login stuff, I couldn't even upload anything onto that. It just, like that website just sucks. And then I tried to contact them saying, hey, I can't even log in anymore, and they refused to help me. So yeah, doing it myself now, no Ingram. Yeah, and just note that a lot of brick and mortar stores won't, even if you follow all the steps, a lot of brick and mortar stores won't sell your self-published book, or they will, but you have to provide it for them, so they won't buy the bulk from you the way they would from, like if you went the traditional publishing route. Instead, you will have to arrive with like a physical box of books and sell them directly to the consumers, and then brick and mortar store gets a cut, and you guys split the cash at the end of the day type of thing. So it's the thing. Having said that, there are a bunch of self-pub books that do make it big. There's reprint rights, which is basically what happened with The Martian and 56 Shades of Grey. That is, they self-pubbed it, it went really well, and then a publisher was like, hey, we know you initially published this already, we would like to buy what's called the reprint rights, which basically gives them the right to print and sell the book, even though they didn't get dibs. You can also, and this is what I've done with Heart of Iron, keep the print and audio rights separate. I am controlling and maintaining the print rights for Heart of Iron for at least a few years. But I'm selling the audio rights to Blackstone, the people who did Citadel, because I don't want to have to hire a whole studio to do that, which would cost, again, a few $1,000s. Self-publishing, doing it right, is very expensive. It would cost me a few $1,000s to hire someone else to do that. I don't have the training or equipment to do it myself, or I could have Blackstone pay me for the privilege of doing the audiobook for Heart of Iron and distributing it at the exact same time and day that I'm publishing the print version, and we're splitting the royalties with that.
Do you get choices on like the voices they use then? And
Yeah, so here's one of the reasons why so many authors, especially these days, choose self-publishing is just because of all of the rejections. It's because trad publishers have the legal right to do whatever the fuck they want with your book. Once you sign that contract, it is legally theirs. And they can do whatever they want. You hear all these horror stories of authors being like, I hate the cover of my book because, I hate the audiobook version. I hate, just they made me write a whole romantic subplot into it that just doesn't belong there. You just hear so many bad things. But a lot of publishers do actually listen to their authors, and Blackstone is one of them. They listen, they and Angry Robot, who did Witch, listened very carefully when I was describing what I wanted with the cover. And then Blackstone way more than Angry Robot, by the way. I'm not mad at this cover, I actually really like it, but it is not what I initially had in mind. But I'm not a graphic designer, so probably for the best. Yeah, and when it came to the voice actors, Blackstone, they actually have their roots in audio. They were publishing audiobooks way before print. So that they specialized in that. And when it came time to choosing the audiobook narrator for Citadel, they basically had 5 different different readers read the same section, sent me the clips, and then I got to say, this one's my favorite, these 2 are fine, not a huge fan of this one. And they very much took that into account. Angry Robot did basically the exact same thing with the audio for Which He Trades with Death as well. So yeah, basically the smaller the publishing company, the more likely they are to listen to the author and work with them. But the bigger companies, they tend to, I mean, they've got the legal and the financial muscle to just kind of steamroll over wherever they want, unless that author is themselves also a huge name and can, you know, kind of stop them in their tracks. No one's telling Brandon Sanderson what he can and cannot do. He's too major. He's too big. Same with Stephen King. But most of us aren't Brandon Sanderson or Stephen King, so it's like I said, it's all about, you know, balancing the creativity with the needs of a business. So, yes.
What's the best and worst advice you've been given about becoming an author?
Put me on the spot like this. What's coming to mind? Best advice is what my mother would say, which is every page you write makes you a better writer. It's very, like, you can get all of the, you know, watch all of the writing advice videos you want, sit in all the classes that you want, and I highly recommend you guys do that, by the way, if you want to be an author, but nothing beats actual experience. Just do that. However, the worst advice I've ever received is write every day. You can't do that. It just, especially if you want it to be a job, you will burn out. This is my professional career. I don't even write every day. I write usually about 5 to 6 days a week, but I do take mental health breaks as needed. You know, everyone who's followed me on TikTok knows I will gladly go on hiatus for a week or a weekend, or just take a day or two off, because you need to give your brain a rest, especially for something like that's creative. It's not like data entry where it's, you know, it's mindless monotony, or like food service. Like, your brain is working very hard to create these things. But like any job, if you use it too much, you're kaput. And if you, like 95% of authors, have a second or third job because publishing company pays pennies, how are you gonna write? You know, I had when I worked food service, I would regularly work 10-hour shifts over like Saturdays or Sundays or Friday. You know, the big days. I'm not writing on those days. Are you nuts? I'm going home. I am heating leftovers for dinner. I am vegging out in front of the television for an hour, and then I'm going to bed. We're not writing after a 10-hour day. A 4-hour day? Fine. Absolutely. I can do that before or after a dinner rush and be totally fine. But not a 10-hour day. My father is a hobby author. He's actually currently got a literary agent for it. They're working on getting a publisher for his post-apocalyptic alien murder mystery. I know. I think he should lead with his second idea, which is time-traveling dinosaurs. But
Time-traveling dinosaurs would
what do
be
I know?
awesome.
What do I know? I'm just the professional.
Time-traveling dinosaurs would be absolutely awesome.
I know, right? That's his next project. But yeah, but like writing is not his full-time job. That he does it because it's fun. It's his hobby, and you can bet your ass he's not writing every day. He still managed to write the full novel, and revise it multiple times. But it's not like he's not writing it. He works for the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, 9 to 5. He's got a whole team that he manages. He's got Magic the Gathering games to go to in the game store down the street. He's got golf. He's got basketball. He likes sports for some reason. So yeah, he's not writing every day. Absolutely not. And neither is my mother, the other professional author of the family. You write when you can. If that is only every Saturday for an hour or two, then it's every Saturday for an hour or two. You'll get the book will be done eventually if you just keep working on it. If it's 3 times a day, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. before you have to go to your factory shift, yeah, okay. Don't envy you, but I'm a night owl, so I tend to write at like, my peak writing hours are like 9:30 to midnight. That's when I'm at my most creative. My second most creative time period is like in the late afternoonish type of deal. But I'm a night owl, so it's usually at night, and it totally fucks with my sleep schedule, so it is what it is.
music on.
I mean, I do and I don't, because I have 2 roommates, and of course I have the filming, which is the content creation. So my weeks tend to look very similar. Day to day though, I mean, I do listen to music in the background. I usually try to match the vibe of the book. So like if it's like when I'm writing Black Wing Volume 2, which is, like I said, based on ancient Greece and Rome, I'm listening to ancient Greek, Roman, Egyptian music or recreations or ambiance with that because it matches the vibe. With this one, the culture was completely out of my ass, but the setting physically is close to the Himalayas. And Pahuda is a mountain town. It's at the base of a mountain range, there's tundra, so I looked a lot toward Nepali culture in terms of like what do they eat, what do they wear, what animals are in the region, just the ground stuff. So when I was writing this, it was a lot of ancient and medieval Nepali music, which is really fun to listen to, by the way. Nothing with words. Sometimes I'll just do light classical music. I can't do heavy classical. If the song goes hard, it distracts me. But if it's just light background noise, that's perfect.
You start doing the finger movement.
Yeah, no, not the finger movement, but like definitely the head bopping and yeah, no. Sometimes I'll go out to like a cafe if I really need a change in scenery or I really need to focus on it. I'm not usually as productive, but it's better than nothing. Yeah, no, it's usually like, days are spent with the business side of things, answering emails, marketing, video editing, stuff like that, and then the evenings and nights are typically spent with the writing, because that's when the creative juices are flowing most often, so. But, the thing with writing is, I get to visit my parents whenever I want, so sometimes I'm doing that instead in the late morning when the dogs are kicking me out of bed, or, I was, last couple of weekends were spent at MiniCon and Vegas and, to award shows and all this stuff, and I was doing a little bit of writing in between events there too, because, I'm going to the events and I'm enjoying them, but also I really just want to stay in my hotel room and write, so I'll leave early and then get some writing done at 2 p.m. Be like, oh, okay, this is totally worth the hundreds of dollars I spent on the plane ticket and the award show ticket and the hotel and everything else. There was like 5 restaurants in the hotel, and only one of them gave me food poisoning, so totally. Yeah, I had to spend an extra night in
Are
Vegas.
you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay now, but not back then. I was mad. Yeah, but I lucked out, so we're okay. Really nice to bring my laptop with me to the airport. When I was in school, at college, and I had to go take the green line or the blue line somewhere. I love doing that because then I can't write or read on the bus, but on the line, absolutely, it's smooth. And I love taking a long trip to the Mall of America to.
I love going to the Mall of America.
Yeah, or just wherever I had to go, or I have to go to work, but the bus schedule is only once every hour to get to that specific spot. So I'll leave for the one that's going to take me there 45 minutes early rather than 20 minutes late, and kill the half hour I have before my actual shift starts writing. You just sometimes you just take whatever time you have and fill in the gaps from there.
So your first book was, from my understanding of it, I haven't read yet, was very sci-fi based.
Yes.
And now you've been doing a lot more fantasy stuff.
It's weird. Citadel is kind of an anomaly. I'm much more in fantasy. I'm a much bigger fan of fantasy than science fiction. Even so, with Citadel, the science is very light. They get telepathy from a plant. There's the genetic mutations that are revealed are, I'm sure, us actual scientists would tear to shreds. There's telekinesis, there's ancestral memory, and it's very hand-waved. It doesn't even have the vibe of sci-fi, so to speak, because they're on an alien planet to be sure, but the society has been there for 400 years, and even though they have the blueprints for things like watches, clocks, lasers, spaceships, whatever, they don't have the materials. So they're using bows and arrows and revolvers and stuff like that to survive and live and all stuff. And at some point, yes, I do want to get them into space. The series started with the idea of telepathic, telekinetic wolves with wings in space, and I'm just like, that's a lot. How did they get to space? And so we're starting with them on the alien planet, and hopefully I'll be able to get them up to space. A lot of it depends on Blackstone Publishing, because legally they own the rights to that. However, even if they do say, all right, after 3 books, we're done, we haven't gotten to space yet, but it doesn't matter, we're not selling as much as we would like to, so 3 books, you're done. Well, in the contract, I get the rights back after 7 years. So 7 years after the last book I published for them, I'll be able to get the rights back and reprint them, write more, self-publish, go to a different publisher with it, whatever. So yeah, sci-fi is a little bit of an anomaly. I was kind of surprised I was able to publish that first, and I was a little nervous about it too, but it's okay, because I tend to focus, even with sci-fi or fantasy or paranormal or whatever, I tend to focus a lot more on the same things, and because I'm a history and social justice nerd, those are my bachelor's degrees, that tends to be the pattern across all of my work. I mean, you think about, every story is unique and different, but at the same time, every author has their own brand. Stephen King is best known for his horror, but he hasn't just written horror, he's also written fantasy. And his style is the same. He does the same types of characters, the same tropes, the same archetypes. Emily Henry, same deal. Brandon Sanderson, same deal. And so that's kind of the same for me, even though I'll dive into a ton of different genres: sci-fi, epic fantasy, dark fantasy, urban fantasy for Cafe Latte. People still expect, okay, where is the badass female character? Where are all the queer characters? Where's the aromantic and or asexual character? Where are the BIPOCs? Where's the damsel in distress who saves herself? There are definitely what social, political issues are we tackling today? There's going to be a happy ending, or at least a hopeful one. I got a brand, and I kind of stick to it. So, and it evolves and changes over time. I'm still a pretty new author. Citadel was my debut novel, and it came out 2 years ago. So, we're gonna see in 10 years, I'm probably gonna be still writing the same stuff, but it's gonna evolve over time. We were talking about Rick Riordan. Well, he's been writing for a very long time, and while he has his brand of Greek mythology, he's done Egyptian mythology, and now he has Rick Riordan Presents, where he basically sponsors and
He also did Norse mythology.
Yep. Rick Riordan Presents, where he helps other authors. He's not going to write Aztec mythos, but he'll happily help someone from that culture do that. But at the same time, he's been writing for so long. You look back on the earliest Percy Jackson books and compare it to the Heroes of Olympus series, and he's definitely improved and changed over time. It's like watching the Disney Plus version of Percy Jackson series, it genuinely felt like a Rick Riordan rewrote the first book with his 10 plus years of extra experience, which was really cool. But it was still very much Rick Riordan, because he still has the cheesy juvenile sense of humor. He loves a good pun, and he loves dwarves, but he also is not afraid to talk about dysfunctional family dynamics, and doesn't get more dysfunctional than Greek mythos. So. We're not getting a tornado. We almost had a tornado yesterday. It's going to be very awkward if that happens today.
I was driving in driver's ed while the tornado sirens were going off.
Why?
Why? Okay,
You do not do that.
I texted my driver's ed like, are we still having behind the wheel, even though there's severe weather warnings? And he was like, yes. So I was
You
driving.
do not do that. Do not risk your safety.
There was a tornado in Princeton heading north. And so I was like, okay, we're just gonna keep driving.
God, no, there was a.
I would
got
never do that.
I got my not driver's license, learner's permit in November, and my parents were actually really happy about that because you need to have it for, I think it was like 6 months or something like that
6 months.
before you get your license, and they were really happy. So it's like, if she can learn how to drive in Minnesota winter, it's gonna be like spring and summer is gonna be no problem at all. And they were absolutely right. Like after driving through my first blizzard with, mom in the passenger seat with a white knuckle, and I'm just like, and then, a few months later, everything's melted, it's muddy, and I'm just like, everyone's like panicking about parallel parking, and oh my god, I'm just like, guys, I almost died the first time I went behind a wheel. This is fine.
I got my learner's permit in September. So
Okay,
like
you're almost there.
yeah.
Now let's just hope it doesn't happen the way it did the year I turned 16, which was the state shutdown. Happened over my birthday, which is in August. When it finally ended, we called, the day of, and I wasn't able to have my driver's test until October. So yeah, it was almost a year
My
of me
birthday
getting my learner's
is
permit.
February 20th, so I had my learner's permit like a couple months before I turned 16, and now I can get it in May.
There you go. Fingers crossed. Good luck.
I've never messed up on parallel parking or 90-degree parking. So.
The 90-degree parking was where I goofed, but my instructor was the only goof I had, so my instructor basically overlooked it. He was this surly, grumpy old man with, fights, sarcasm, grumbling all the time, and I immediately relaxed. It was just like, oh, it's just my grandfathers and dad all rolled into one person. Okay, I can do this. This is fine. It would have been something else if he was like quiet or demure or like gentle or like, something like that. No, give me the surly, stern bastard. I know how to work with that.
My learning instructor is like so quiet, and he's like,
No, because what are you thinking?
yeah. I told him, I drove through the whole entire cities to go to like Stillwater or Duluth for my dance comps, and he's like, okay. Thank you for your input.
Go after the loudmouths and the people who have no filter, and they're gonna be your best friends. You're gonna hate them sometimes, but they'll always be honest with you. If that's all, we can start heading over to the book signing spot, and you guys can start giving these people your money.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.